Good morning. Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're going to conclude our study of the resurrection account in John's Gospel today. We're going to be looking at John chapter 21. I'm not going to be able to read the whole chapter because it's a long-ish chapter. It's all about this one event. So, after the formal end of the Gospel, in chapter 21, we get an extra scene. And like I said yesterday, or when we were together last time, we're used to that kind of storytelling, having an epilogue that changes the color of everything else that we've already seen in the story. Reading an epilogue in a book, seeing the final scene, the extra scene at the end of the movie, or maybe the scene while the credits are rolling, and we get a better understanding. And I think this probably is written as part of John's signature. John is an old man. He signs it at the end. I'm the one writing this book, the disciple whom Jesus, this is me, the disciple that Jesus loved. And I think that in the first century, as he lived to an extreme old age, and didn't die until the 90s, and probably till he was in his 90s, that the word got around that he was going to, that Jesus would come again during his lifetime. And that's not what Jesus said. And so I think he wants to give us this to explain that that his old age that was all wrong. That yes, he's old, and yes, he's lived a long time, but Jesus didn't make a promise to him, this promise to him. So I do think that that's one of the reasons he wrote chapter 21. Chapter 21, we're on the Sea of Galilee. It's the great catch of fish. In Luke chapter 5, this is the calling of Peter. Peter knows Jesus. Peter hasn't followed Jesus yet. Jesus gives them a great catch of fish at the wrong time of the day. It is this miracle that brings Peter to absolute faith. He falls on his knees. He says, "I am a sinful man. Get away from me." And Jesus says, "No, from now on you'll catch men." They leave everything on the beach and they follow him. At this point, Peter has gone fishing again on the Sea of Galilee. John uses Tiberias, which would have been the Roman name, and we're many years past the Jewish Revolution and the fall of Jerusalem, and he wouldn't use a Jewish name for the Sea of Galilee. He would have called it the Sea of Tiberias, the Roman name. Um, so Simon Peter, Thomas the twin, Nathaniel or Bartholomew, he's there called, in chapter 1, along with Philip and Peter and Andrew. And the sons of Zebedee, that would be him, and his brother James, and two other disciples. We don't know who the two other ones were, but so in other words, we have and Andrew's not there unless he's one of the two others: Simon, Thomas, Nathaniel, James, and John, and two others. So we have seven. This was an interesting number. Seven in the boat. There would have been room for seven in the boat, but barely. But room for seven to work in the boat. You could have sailed more than that, but to be there working. Anyway, um, um, so they don't catch anything. They see somebody on shore. He's got a fire going. He calls out, "Did you catch anything, children?" And they said no. And he says, "Cast your nets on the other side." And they haul up all these fish. In fact, we get a count of the fish, which I think is important because it's just such a detail that there's 153 fish, large fish that are in the nets. So many that the nets were torn. 153. They counted them, and it's that kind of detail that lets you know this is not just a nice story that he put in at the end. I mean, he was there. They counted the number of fish, and John is the one who recognizes that it's Jesus. And he says, "It's the Lord." And when Peter understands this, he puts his outer garment on because he was stripped for working, throws himself, that's what the text says, into the sea, swims to shore. He hauls up the net of fish. I mean, he's just so anxious. So the magnetic pull of Jesus is strong with Peter. That's why he followed him to Caiaphas's house. He can't stay away from where Jesus is, and but he has unfinished business. There's a real connection between Luke and John, um, and we know from Luke's gospel that when Peter denied Jesus 3 times, that after the third denial, their eyes met. And so he experienced the full force. We're also told in Luke's gospel that Jesus said to him ahead of time, Satan has asked permission, that's an interesting phrase, to sift you like wheat. But when you return, strengthen your brothers. He says, Satan's going to chew you up, spit you out. You're going to fail. And then he goes on to say, you're going to deny me 3 times. You're going to fail, but you're also going to come back. And then you can make others stronger because of your experience. I mean, and he says, I'm praying for you, which is, um, and he's denied Jesus 3 times. And all of this has happened, but there's still unfinished business. And so they eat breakfast and they're walking. And Jesus and Peter side by side. And Jesus is asking Peter, do you love me? And he asks him 3 times, do you love me? And you've heard this preached. And it's significant. I don't know the exact significance of it, but Jesus is saying agape. Do you absolutely, I mean, do you love me with agape love? And Peter is holding back a little bit. He uses the word phileo. Um, Agape Sacrificial love. Phileo's covenantal love. They're different. Um, um, and and agape is more encompassing, more intense. They would be speaking Aramaic, not Greek. So John's using Greek to capture the nuance of what they were saying to each other, and that Mark is holding back a bit. Jesus says in 3 different ways, feed my sheep, tend my lambs. I have work for you to do, among young and old. Um, and he asked him 3 times. After the third time, it hurts Peter's feelings. And he says to Jesus, you know everything. You know what's in my heart. Whether I can say it or not, you know that it's there. You know that it's there. And if it's not there, you'll know that too. You don't need to ask, you know. And then Jesus says, okay, when you were young, you used to go where you wanted to, do what you wanted to. Today, you said, let's go fishing, you went fishing. But when you're older, you're going to be put in change. You're going to be taken where you don't want to go. You're going to have to die for my name. And then he said, so now follow me. And he does. It's it's uh it's not just an epilogue. It's a fitting into the gospel accounts, to all 4 gospels, because we have Simon Peter 3 times leaving his boat for Jesus. Once when he's called initially, once when he leaves his boat to walk on the water, and once when he leaves his boat here. And and every time it's an act of faith, an act of absolute faith, of such deep, strong faith, and every time it's a risk. But it's not a risk because of the faith that you have in Jesus. And and then John's walking behind, and he says, "Well, what about him?" And people have attributed to Peter these bad, like, "Am I your favorite? Or is he your favorite?" And I don't think it's that at all. I think I don't. I don't. Peter, Andrew, James, and John were 4 brothers who grew up together, who were in business together. Peter and John will be mission partners. I mean, in a few days, they're going to be mission partners. They're going to be a pair. They're going to be a duo. Peter and James are the older, and Andrew and John are the younger. John's his little brother, the way Andrew's his little brother, and he's there. I think he wants to know. I think he wants to know what's going to happen to his friend. Is it going to be him too, or just me? To which Jesus replies, "That's not your business." If I want him to stay until I come again, that's my business. And I think that's why that little piece is there at the end, because I think that in his 90s, people are saying he's still here because Jesus hasn't come yet, but he will come before John dies. And I think John is trying to say, no, you weren't there. That's not what it was about. And Jesus never said that. And I'm the one who ought to know because I'm the one writing this gospel. I'm the one who's wrote this. I was the one who was there. And that's the way the gospel accounts end. Well, I've taken more than 10 minutes of your time today. I apologize for that. It was a long passage. We're going to look at, take a while, few days to look at 1 Corinthians 15. We'll introduce 1 Corinthians 15 next time. Thank you for joining me for what is now almost 11 good minutes with the Word.